Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of this Viz Careers series brought to you by the Data Visualization Society. My name is Elijah Meeks. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at a small startup called Notable, and I was also one of the co-founders and an executive director at one point at the Data Visualization Society. We've created this series to give you some description of how people navigate their careers. We try to understand the patterns that people take to become successful at data visualization. And in doing so, we've tried to bring you as varied cohort of interviewees as we can. And this time I have the pleasure of introducing you to Anatoly Bondarenko. He is the head of data journalism at Texty. And he's in hiatus right now, and he is currently an officer in the armed forces of Ukraine. Welcome, Anatoly. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you. I'm good. Nice to meet you. Thank you for invitation.
Very, very happy to provide it. I think that what we've tried to do in these interviews is we've tried to provide folks with something more than typical career advice, because the typical career advice is very naive, very simplistic, and it's always up, up, up. I'm going to get better. How do I get better? How do I get the promotion? How do I do better? How do I get to the bigger company? But what we all know from our own career trajectories, and you especially, is that it's not always up. There are times when you are in hiatus, maybe not for as dramatic a reason, but there are times when we are forced to deal with other aspects of our personal lives, world events. And so I think that understanding not just your perspective on data visualization, which I think is going to be very interesting. I think there's a lot of interesting material we're going to get through, but also how you navigate your career, dealing with some of the stress and tension of 8 years of a frozen war and now a hot war, and just along those lines. So for those of you for folks who don't know, why don't you talk a little bit about your career trajectory? We'll pull up your visualization of your career trajectory, and you can tell us about how you got started in data visualization and where it took you.
Yeah, I created this chart to illustrate my path, my career in data visualization. And my first experience was really back in time, back in 1999. I created some kind of visual tool for website of one of the investment company in Ukraine. And it was first part of that downloaded data from Yahoo Finance about main financial indexes. And the second one, draw it in the form of triangles. If the green triangles pointed up, was about increasing, and the red triangles pointed.
Classic.
Yeah. So it's this script. I guess probably once per 10 minutes update data and show this current situation on world markets.
Right.
It was my first. It was very. I have a great fun with this because it was kind of side project, my side project. Yeah.
So often when folks talk about the first time that they're working with data visualization, you hear them all say this similarly, right? That it was fun, that you enjoyed it. I wonder, and even if you're talking about sort of green triangles and red triangles facing down, what was it what was the precursor to that? Had you studied graphics? Had you done some design? Did you consider yourself artistic or scientific? Where was it that you were coming from when you were first making that chart?
Okay, I guess it's because of my technical background. First of all, I have an engineering education. I educated as engineer physics, and But probably it's if we go back some years back, it probably connected to my first experience with computers, with personal computers. So one of my first programs was program on basic language, which draws graphs for different mathematical functions. For example, for parabola or sinus or cosinus, and so on. And I remember this feeling of wonder when I first draw these lines on very primitive display, some kind of character display, and with stars instead of dots, and so.
Right, of course.
So that's probably connected to my later experiments.
This also is very common.
I guess
I've interviewed a few people, and a couple of them have pointed back to having this graphing calculator, and how the graphing calculator opened up their eyes to how mathematics or science could be very visual, and that was a very powerful appeal to them.
Yeah.
And then you went from that to working in PHP, the greatest programming language of them all, right? And what were you doing with PHP?
We got some kind of site for political activists and for street activists, and I tried to compare programs for different political parties. And probably in our country, the program of political parties is really big, huge, kind of tens, probably hundreds of pages. And I thought, how can I help people to compare different programs? So it was kind of very simple interactive tool. You just put some keywords in interactive form, and you got some kind of column of lines from programs, and lines with this word highlighted by some colors. So, for example, you could see how many times word Russia or word USA you could encounter in different programs. So visual comparison for all 5 or 6 programs of parties.
Very
basically 5-6 columns with.
And you might show the sentence around it.
Yeah, when you go. Yeah, when you go with mouse on this line, you could read this line.
Yeah, I did a bit when I worked with digital humanities at Stanford. I did a bit with text analysis and text visualization.
Yeah, it's exactly text visualization.
It's keyword in context, right? And it's interesting to me because you've got this project. It looks like, just before 2003. Eventually, there's going to be this organization called Texty, right? And Texty seems to be like, just based on the name of it. Was it that you realized that there was this? Was it something that was particularly interesting to you, or you thought that this was a valuable, like doing text analysis, having things that were focused on text, or was Texty something that the name implies more something about sort of journalism and stories?
Yeah, it's probably about stories, but. Yeah, it's stories first and text analysis second.
Right. Yeah, no, I saw more maps than I saw text analysis. There's a very interesting. We'll be getting to it. There's a very interesting barge full of watermelons that will follow its journey in text. So tell me about Texty. You founded this. It looks like based on your Axis sometime around 2009, 2008. Is that right?
About 2009, 2008. 10.
Okay.
Yeah. With my colleague we worked together on printed magazine, weekly magazine, for 2 years, and it was my first diving into the infographics.
Yeah.
I did not draw it yourself, but I prepared some kind of scenario for once per week for each edition of magazine, some kind of scenario for infographics. We worked with illustrator, with artist, and we kind of duet, duo work if, to create some static printed visualization. Remember this, returning to this, I have to say that it was awful infographics.
You know, this period is that time is the time for some pretty awful infographics.
Yeah, but
you know, but infographics we often associate with sort of graphic designers who get into more and more infographics, or data journalism. We think about people who don't have a software development or engineering background. How is it that you ended up headed in that direction, do you think?
So basically, in 2010, I got two part of my needed background. I got technical background, and I got experience as a journalist back in those years in printed magazine. So it's kind of very helpful, very lucky coincidence.
Yeah.
And about 2011, I guess, I started to go to try to experiment more with interactive visualizations online, and I was very interested in it, and I started to study short set of skills. I mean, graphic design, theory of data visualizations, and so on.
What's the so when you hear, you know, some of the people watching will want to have a data journalism career, do you think that it's better for people who are getting into data journalism to have a more formal training with engineering, with computer science, with software development? Or do you think it's something that they can sort of pick up and supplement after they get their degree in journalism or they study journalism?
Okay, I think it never hurt to study some math or engineering, but based on our experience for our team, most of our members is from fine arts, so to say. They are journalists or some kind of other non-technical education, and they meet this engineering part of this professional this in our newsroom. So we have we have some kind of educational process for new members, even without technical backgrounds. The main question is your desire to study, your passion to study, your passion to do something. So it could be very bad looking, very naive thing, but the main question is, do you have a passion to do something by yourself?
So how do you there's lots of folks who are going to want to head a data journalism outfit, or they're going to want to found a company that does something like this. But many more of them want to know, well, how do I get a job with somebody that's doing this? So when you're interviewing people, how do you identify that they have those skills, that they have that capacity to learn?
Okay, something you could see something, some parts of those future skills during the first interview. but actually the main test is work, is first projects.
Right.
And after that you could be sure that this specific person.
So would you
will
imagine
be
that
very,
if somebody wanted to show you during an interview that they had that, then it seems like you would want to see examples of the work they've done.
yeah. Examples is very, very important. Very important.
More
Some kind
than
of
just kind of
some kind of
soft
portfolio.
interview questions. Yeah.
You mean what questions we are using during the interview?
Yeah, I want to understand how it is, not just the questions, but also how you evaluate those examples. Are you looking for style or interactivity or complexity? What kind of advice would you give to an early career, like junior person who wants to get a job like that?
Yeah, you're right. There will be different demands for different people. For example, for our interns it's one set of demands, and for people with person who want to work in our team, it will be quite another set of requirements. And if we are speaking about interns, probably the main indicator is two factors. First, the desire to work in this field, and you could spot this basically during the first interview. And second one is probably some kind of critical mindset, or not critical, but some kind of desire to find some kind of little discoveries, probably to know a little bit more about how world works, and so on. So it's very important too.
Not just do the job, close your computer, and you're done, but rather someone who's demonstrated that. Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it looks like you founded this company, and it's been around for more than 10 years. And I can tell you, as someone who founded a company 2.5 years ago, that seems like quite an achievement. Can you talk a bit about the successes and why it is that you feel like you achieved those successes? What kind of feedback do you get from your audience? That kind of thing. Like, would you say that this was a really successful data journalism endeavor?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Fortunately for me, I have my colleague, my partner, Roman Kulchinsky, who is editor-in-chief, who is co-founder of Texte. And the distribution of roles is as he's more formal, more work process oriented, and I'm like more for experiments and kind of other part of this creative process. So I'm really very lucky in this for my part. So I could I managed to arrange team of some of very talented data journalists, or future data journalists, and we have conditions, some right condition to create to work on data journalism projects. So
that's great.
So but of course it's really very big questions. What is I can say about, probably, in my opinion, our best achievement for this part. We managed to create this constantly changing educational process in this, because it's very important for this field. You got new technologies each year. So you got new methods each year. So we got new demands for data journalist projects each year, and so on and so on. It's kind of it's a gift, and and at the same time it's kind of bad spell for so I mean you have to you can't stop, just stop. You have every time you have to learn something new and so on.
Yeah.
For some people it's really tough, but for other type of people it's contrary to this, it's very fun. It's source of fun. So we tried to organize in our newsrooms some kind of process, of inside process, to teach new member and to help old one to not to stop. So it's probably the best, our best achievement.
That's great. I guess. That's great. So this whole period that you've got nicely marked out on this chart is, for Ukraine, a very challenging time. There's the annexation of Crimea, the Donbass, the frozen war with Russia, and now as of February this year. So, it's clearly you've made a tough decision as of the declaration of war by Russia. But also that must have been in the back of your mind the whole time, right? This must have loomed large in your mind while you were doing all of this work.
So it's interesting that our first office and our first team members, except me and Roman, we got this our first office back in 2015. But back in 2014, we already be in state of war with Russia, but unofficial, so the hybrid war.
Right.
And since 2014, we got this like a very big stone above our heads. But for us as editors, for me and for Man, it's kind of old struggle back in time to our work in printed magazine. We knew even in 28 after Russia invaded Georgia. If you know about this war.
Right. Yeah. South Ossetia, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. We knew even back in time that this kind of anti-imperialistic war against Russia will be inevitable, because it's kind of logic of Russian Empire or ex-Russian Empire. They will try to recreate old glory and so on and so on, to gather old colonies, such as, for example, ex-colonies such as Ukraine. Yeah. So in some sense it was inevitable, and we always remember about it, and we got probably 1/3 of all our text of articles or materials is about this anti-colonial struggle, about Russia, about our different relationship, about history, about culture of Ukraine, and so on and so on. So
did you find, because this is, colonial, imperial, like these are things that people have talked about a long time with old-fashioned journalism. Did you find that there were new ways you could talk about that there were new things? Actually, in fact, let's pull up the watermelon barge, because I think that this is very interesting related to that. So keep going. I think actually back. We want to go back. Let me check my own slides, or maybe not. Bear with us. Of course, this is always fun how we try to. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go forward. It's closer to the end. I believe it's slide number 8. There we go. So this is very interesting to me. Now I don't read Ukrainian, but fortunately Google Translate gave me some indication of what's going on here. But and for those who aren't aware, we'll have links in the description of the video so you can go check out all these projects. This is an animated map. The blue line that you see here tracks up the. This is the Dnieper River, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a barge going up the river. I'll let you explain what's on the barge and what's going on here. But it's an animated map that follows the progress of this bar well up the waterway. Now tell me, what is the gray and blue and red text that's showing up next to it?
Yeah, if I remember correct, blue one is humor, tweets with humor, with some kind of irony, light, but very, very positive tweets about this event.
Pause for a second and tell our audience what's on this barge.
Yeah, it was first barge during big period of time. First after big. First barge with many tons of watermelons from Kherson region. It is kind of capital of watermelons. Right. Unfortunately, occupied right now, but in place of very intensive fighting right now. Mm-hmm. It was barge organized. This flow, how to say, this race, this was organized, but very interesting person. Mm-hmm. His surname is Vodatursky. It's kind of very big agriculture industrialist, so to say, kind of very wealthy, very interesting human person. He was killed 1 month ago in Mykolaiv after a Russian rocket strike. It was a story. It was story in some Western media, because he was connected to grain supplies, to grain trading, and so on. And he was author of idea to gather this watermelons, to put it on the barge and to float on the river. And it was really very positive event, because for 2 days you got very good watermelons in Kyiv. Mm-hmm. But on the time I mentioned that Russian propaganda, pro-Russian propaganda, pro-Russian sources very, very agitated by this event, and they started to criticize it. They started to compare it. For example, some silly comparison, like we in Russia got space fleet, and those Ukrainians got one barge with watermelons. So something like this is what pink ones is about. It's Russian propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is an interesting visualization. What this spoke to me when I was seeing this, and I invite folks to go watch this animation. Which, like I said, we'll provide links for. What's interesting to me is that this is the state of information war, right? Yeah. This is a propaganda war. There was an expectation on Russia's part that this would be a very short war, that they would come in and that the Ukrainians would welcome them as liberators, and they would, capture Ukraine in 3 days. And part of the reason they thought that, and correct me, of course, if I'm wrong, was because this kind of social media information war, this kind of information propaganda war has been going on for a decade. They've been trying to prepare the population of Ukraine to feel like Russia is superior, to feel like Ukraine is inferior or not even real. And so that to me is very striking about this journalism.
Exactly. They basically portrayed us like a failed state all this time.
Yeah.
At last, I can say from probably 2005, after first Orange Revolution, and after so last 17 years we got those very powerful Russian propaganda from in all channels, in all media, and one of the main messages always was Ukraine is not existent. It's kind of error, and this is a failed state.
Right. The Ukraine.
Even such tasty and good topic as watermelon,
that's what struck me.
Yeah,
that's what struck me, was because there are claims they seem to be supportive of Russian interference in the American elections. You can understand. I think all of us are media savvy enough to know that different states are using social media, are using internet channels to perform propaganda and information warfare. To me, what was striking about this was to realize this wasn't just about going after politicians. This wasn't just about going after political parties or historians. This is also making fun of a barge of watermelons, right? Like that, it is on all. It's on every layer, trying to make this message constant to a people, and that seems very, very visible and very new and very, exciting. Like you said, a blessing and a curse. It's exciting to see it, and it's terrifying to think about how much of this is going on a regular basis now, on even the most mundane of topics.
Yeah, you're right.
I want to jump back a slide and talk a bit about one of these maps too, because I want to just show some of this work that you've done. To get back to this question, you were talking about the Orange Revolution. I believe I covered up the legend, of course, but I believe this is the map immediately after that. Very exciting map. Very interesting graphic up at the top right. Why don't you explain to me what's going on here?
It's how this type of chart is called. I forget about it.
I don't know the term for it. Maybe like a magnetic needle chart, because of course the lines move depending on some. Yeah, I don't know that it's named. We can open up the, if someone watching this knows what to call this chart, you can leave it in a comment, and we'll. But
I call it colored fur chart map. But I mean this triangle things with each point on triangle is coded three values. So it's which in some we got 100% each point. For example, we got three axes on this each side of triangle is one axis, but we have a possibility to show it on the plane because they are not independent. They total sum of each of values from all these three axes is 100%. So for one axis we got pro-European, learning of political parties. Yeah, some kind of for Western, so to say, Western.
Sure,
party.
And that's the blue.
Yeah. Red one or some kind of pink one is about pro-Russian parties, and the yellow one is a populist.
Okay.
So we coded results for each voting post election station. It's about 30,000 if ever in Ukraine. So each point was coded by this combination of these three values. How many people voted for European parties, for pro-Russian parties, and for populist parties. So and color also depends about on this three values, as you can see. So if so basically color and length of these needles is length is how big is support of this parameter for Europe, for example.
Yeah.
So and I guess it's very interesting final picture due to this coding of three values at once.
It's very exciting. And again, just like with the watermelon barge, this is part of a scrolly telling data journalism story that shows this change over time.
Yeah.
And gives a very, to my mind, valuable historical primer for folks who aren't familiar with the relationship between Russia and Ukraine that sort of has been changing over the last decade and a half. So, I think that it'd be great for folks to take a look at this. We had a comment from the chat by Robert Monfera that it's a ternary plot, and it's definitely a ternary plot on the on how you've created the plotted the points. That's definitely a ternary plot up in the triangle up on the top right, and that's how you've created the glyph. But then those glyphs in collection placed onto a map. I mean, to me, it looks like, you get metal filings, you put a magnet under it, or you look at wind flow or things like that. These maps have been made to show, especially political party change. It's much easier in America, where we only ever have two political parties. When you have more than two recognizable, then you have to use something novel like this, which is very exciting. In contrast, let's go back to slide 2. In contrast to maps like this, very exciting, very interesting, sophisticated data visualization, what we seem to see around the war in Ukraine now, if you're on Twitter, it's hard not to notice these kind of updates. Instead, what we see very simple maps, almost infographics. They use lots of icons. There's a lot of text oftentimes laid on top of them. What do you think about when you see something like this? Do you wish that there was someone out there who was compiling these sort of open source intelligence resources and making more sophisticated data visualization? Or do you think that it's because maybe a person reading Twitter isn't an analyst, this is all they need? What do you think of when you see material like this?
I think that each map depends on medium or where it lives. I guess it's typical example of Twitter maps, so to say. It's exactly such. It's a very good format for short chunk of text, and you have to place very big amount of text on the map because you can't write a big post in Twitter. So
right. I think very good for Twitter maps is not necessarily a compliment, right? It's
yeah, of course. No, it's not a compliment at all. It's just when some kind of functionality prevail, some aesthetics, and it's just Twitter map for good or for bad.
So do you think that an audience, do you think, I have often said that I want people to become more sophisticated in how they can read data visualization, and I feel like you should be able to put on Twitter a network chart or a text visualization. I think that would be very exciting to try to communicate. Do you think that there is hope for that, or do you think that I'm too idealistic, that we can get to a point where people, instead of this kind of map, they see your kind of map, and it's going to be more compelling to them on social media?
Unfortunately,
I think I know your answer.
Please excuse me, but unfortunately, we are moving now from more sophisticated to more simple social networks.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, for example, TikTok. Look at TikTok, for example.
That's true.
So probably you're too naive here.
So let's analyze these then from the perspective that they're being provided, which is, unfortunately, part of it is entertainment. People watch these wars in the same way that they watch reality television now. And part of this is also, like we were saying earlier, part of that information war. You want to convince the other side that their cause is hopeless, so that they have lower morale, that they are less willing to fight. If we can go to the next map on slide 3, you can see, so this is from the previous map was from a source that was pro-Ukraine. This map is from a source that is pro-Russia. And I want to make sure that I'm clear to my audience that this is a very problematic map that does not necessarily reflect reality. But what it provides is, it provides this narrative that even if there are successes in Ukraine, this is, and it says it with very slick graphics. I much prefer the style of this map to the other one. Mm-hmm. It says, hey, even if there are some successes by the Ukrainians, don't worry, we've got them trapped, or we're going to roll them back. And so do you think that, like when I look at this, and I spent some time with GIS and cartography and mapping, do you think that there's value in teaching the folks who post Twitter maps the differences in how their map communicates its own authority, right? That it says, like, this map to me, immediately when I saw it, I thought, oh, this is a better map. And I thought, therefore, it's more true, right? The other maps, somebody took Google Maps, they put icons on it, they put a bunch of text on it. This map has a legend, it has shaded regions, it has good iconography. This is it reads as more true because it's more sophisticated. Do you think that does that make sense to you? Do you think that there's something as part of this? I'm not trying to give some Russian propagandist like a medal, but it is interesting to me that we have these differences of how this material is presented on social media.
Well, it's a very interesting question. And first of all, I have to say that this map is actually more simple than previous.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Right.
Yeah. Here we got some very common style of icons and better using of fonts and so on and so on, and colors, and this map contain less information than previous.
Yeah.
But you're right in the sense that this map is much more better visually. I mean, like visual aesthetics, and I think this is we got a danger in this map. It's more simple and it's more sexy, so to say,
Exactly.
pretty, so to say, and so it's more powerful tool of propaganda.
Right.
Because of these reasons. So about your question, do we need to teach people to make a real map in GIS systems and so? So as you probably know better than me, all map is have its purpose. So this one as a propaganda is very powerful, but in many cases we need probably not so sexy but technical with many information, very useful technical maps which we could use for real planning, for example, a battle. So you can plan a battle with this map.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is interesting. I have spent, like I said earlier, a lot of time trying to convince people that that regular people, citizens, need higher data visualization literacy. And for a long time, it's because I wanted them to communicate more complex or sophisticated things, or understand more complex or sophisticated things, like what the government is doing, what society is doing, that's presented in these complex ways. But I think that what you're also saying here is that because all of us are on TikTok and all of us are on Twitter, it would be better if we had that data visualization literacy, so we weren't easily convinced by these propaganda maps and data visualization. I think there's going to be more and more, not just tweets to try to have information war, but also we see this with groups that deny climate change or make other sort of contentious claims, that they can create some very beautiful charts that seem very compelling and very true because of that. And so, maybe we need people to have higher data visualization literacy so that they're less susceptible to this kind of influence.
Yeah, it's probably the same as with real or fake news. We need to teach people about critical mindset, about how to differentiate between real and fake information. It's the same thing. The same thing with visualization. Visualization, even probably it's more difficult because
it is.
You got not only text, you got those visual coding, those visual methods, and you have, of course, you have to teach to tell people about bigger amount of information which each visualization contains. So yeah, I agree with you that we need to teach people about visualizations, but visualization literacy. But from the other side, I know that it will be a very difficult task.
I think I agree with you. We have to, what I think is that when young people learn about maps, they should also learn about all of this other data visualization, because if you don't start then, it's very hard. So one of the things that you talked about that I found very exciting in the work that Texty is doing is that you say that you have to show a more complicated view. And so what we have here is a project that's looking at street names that I assume refer to Soviet personalities or Soviet
exactly.
Battles and places. And along with the map, a beautiful map, you also have this dot plot, I suppose. But it shows uncertainty bands, right? It shows the margin of error. You're actually using uncertainty in coding, and you're putting that in front of people. Did you get any feedback from this? Did you do any user testing or anything? Where I guess what I'm asking is, could people read this? Did they understand what it meant?
I think that most of our readers understand what is on this chart, because this area of uncertainty, kind of blur area, is blur is equal uncertainty. So for the most people. So and if I remember right, we also tell a little bit about this chart in our article, but I don't remember.
You've made a lot of. It's okay. You've made a lot of articles, so I'm not expecting you to remember every detail of every one of them.
In my experience, that's very understandable. Such a way to show uncertainty. It's we don't have many questions about it from our
readers. It does seem intuitive, and I think that I think that's a good sign, and I think that that's part of this problem, is not just on making readers better and more willing to read complex charts, but also finding things like this that are very intuitive when it comes to expressing complexity. I wonder, while we're here in this, what kind of technology is typically being used here to build these charts? Is it D3? Are there some other things going on? Do you do pre-processing or use other tools to, say, analyze networks or GIS?
So your questions about map?
Well, not just the map, but all of the work that we're sort of seeing with the scrolly telling. How are you doing animated maps? How are you making these the charts?
We, as usual, as a rule, we do some very rough prototypes on whiteboard or on paper. But main experiment starts in browser, and with D3, because you could really quickly change many visual parameters.
Right.
Yes. So something like this. So main experiments is in browser. And but we, of course, we got those most important process, work with data. It's usually biggest part of each project, kind of from 17 to 90%.
It's just processing the data, cleaning it up, making it make sense.
Gathering data. Yeah.
And does during the gathering data process, is it that does that make someone who takes part in that process better at visualizing the data? Does it sort of does the familiarity with transforming and cleaning the data help, or is it a different person who does that?
We got. Can you clarify?
Sure. So you were saying that most of the time was spent working on the data.
Yeah.
And then 10-20% on making the charts. Is it the same person doing that?
In most cases, yes.
And does it seem like that helps with their ability to make those charts? Do you think it's better?
For sure. I don't know. Is it for better? I mean, without intrinsic knowledge of structure of data, of connections in data, of properties of data, you could miss very different solutions.
Right. That makes sense.
For visualization. So for me, it's very important to make your hand how to say to dive into your data.
Sure.
Yeah. So
no, I think that's
you have to know the structure because basically you can't start create visual coding for that if you don't know what is inside your data.
right.
So you have to be very familiar with your data set.
That seems to be a common lesson that I hear in these interviews. That first of all, that you spend a lot of time working with the data and not just making the graphics, but also that working with the data means better graphics when you make it. I look at something like this chart, which I love, and you know, this is a very simple chart on its face, right? It's just a line chart, but you've got these regions in it that you've identified. You're using differences in the dashed lines versus the solid lines. There's a lot of annotation. I think that it's very powerful to remind people who are doing data visualization that it doesn't just have to be this very strange looking map or very complex network or something, right? That you can make a powerful graphic, and it can just be a bar chart, or in this case, a line chart.
Yeah, and some kind of additional value is that we can prove each point of this chart.
Mm-hmm.
So when you place your mouse on some point on chart, you immediately got a screenshot from video below, and you could prove to yourself that there's exactly such amount of cars in this moment. So it's very important for this project, I guess.
When I was playing with this, I wished I had this kind of tool for everywhere that I go. You know, this is the kind of thing that you sort of explain for folks what's going on here in case they don't get a chance to go in.
It's we try to check how effective is money gathering for how to say it in English when you have to park a car.
Right, the parking meter.
Yeah. You have to pay, and we don't have in those times we don't have parking meters.
Mm-hmm.
We got some people, live persons, live humans, and we have to pay them, and they could give you back a check, or a bill, or some kind of document that you paid for this place. But from the other side, sometimes they don't want to give this paper. They just got money. So it's kind of corruption, kind of bribe.
A little bit sounds like.
So you have to pay. You may pay a lesser sum, but you don't got this bills. So we try to find how many money, how big this losses of money for city budget on these parkings. So we placed our cams on three parking lots, and we filmed each during the day. We calculated how many cars was how long on this specific parking lot, and we compared to data about money from some city open data portal about this specific parking lot, and we found that at the best city got about 20% money at maximum. So
oh wow,
80% of money
that's not good.
Just got got to the pockets of those people who are managers on these parking lots.
Well, like I say with all of these, I want to invite folks watching this to go and visit your site texty.org.ua. Because all of these are richly interactive. All of them are very interesting. Many of them are in Ukrainian, but fortunately, Google Translate is there to at least give a broken version of it. I found them very powerful. I found your work extremely impressive.
Thank you.
And to look at what you're doing now, I mean, I'm sitting here in, the worst I have to deal with is it's very hot in California this week. You're sitting there and you're, in uniform and dealing with a much more challenging struggle. So I appreciate it, Anatoly, taking the time to visit with me, to take part in this interview and to talk about your work and talk about the lessons you find.
Again, thank you for inviting. And I want to stress that my team, my colleagues, dear colleagues, still working even in these conditions, very tough conditions. They still producing, fortunately, producing very, very powerful data journalism projects about this war currently. So if you want to know a little bit more, please go to the site. And
you must be very proud of them.
So yeah, I'm really proud of them.
I can see that. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you again for this possibility to speak. It was really nice to speak with you.
Same, the same.